This module explains how to add drivers that contain multiple zones in Integration Designer APEX. Let's begin. In this project file, we have selected the Driver tab in our Add Workspace item window. All the drivers available for use in our system file appear in the list displayed. Drivers with a green dot just above the source icon on the left have been optimized for APEX. Drivers that have been optimized in APEX have special functionality. They contain tags so that pages created for that device will be auto-programmed. Certain drivers are separated by the various services they offer. For example, receivers that have built-in music services such as Pandora, Spotify, and others show these as separate sources in the driver list. This makes it easier for you to focus on the features you're using by removing commands that are not needed for a project. Also, drivers that apply to components that have the potential to contain multiple units or zones have a name designation with a next item in angled brackets. As we scroll through various drivers that have the next item feature, you can see that they typically belong to devices like receivers, music streamers, thermostats, and audio and video distribution components. These devices have the potential to have multiple zones. First, we add a Sonos driver to the first room in the system file. Click Next. And notice that in the Instance menu, the value is set to New Driver. The default name is Player 1 Sonos. Since this is the first time we're adding the Sonos driver to our project file, it is a new driver, so that is the only option in the list. Next, we add another Sonos driver to the second room in our project and click Next. Notice this time, the instance of the driver is set to Sonos and the default player is Player 2 Sonos. If we try and look at the instance field, we can set it to New Instance, which will now change the default name of the Sonos to Player 1 Sonos number 2, because it will add a new driver, and this will be the first player controlled by that driver. Let's set it back to Sonos, which will add this as the second player on the existing driver. This feature increments the zones based on the instance selection. By adding the driver 4 times using the same instance, we're not adding 4 drivers. Rather, we're auto-programming 4 different Sonos zones and telling our driver how many zones we're using. If we had toggled the instance field to New Driver, it would be like adding 4 different drivers, which is not the right thing to do. By incrementing the zones, we're ensuring that each Sonos zone is programmed with the underlying player codes, without the need to have to change the programming to the applicable zone. This methodology may be used for other drivers that have multiple zones. Some examples are the AD64 driver, receivers, music streamers, thermostats, and security. If the instance is set to use the same driver, you can expect APEX to add zones to the driver while auto-programming user interfaces for each zone with the underlying codes. Now let's add the remaining 2 zones to our 4-room project file and review the results. Close the Add Workspace window and click on the Sonos driver under Drivers in the system tree. Next, click on the driver properties in the driver configuration partition to the right of the workspace. You'll see that 4 Sonos zones have been set up in the driver. We may rename the player names and input the proper serial numbers for the driver later. Finally, we'll examine the pages for each Sonos player that was created. Player 1 has been programmed with codes that point to Player 1. Player 2 has been programmed with Player 2 codes, and so on. Each player page contains device codes that point to that player. There are times when you might not want to increment zones for a driver. For example, the first time you add a receiver with the next item feature, it will create a Zone 1 or a main zone source device. If you add that driver again, even in another room, it may try to increment the zone, assuming you want to choose the Zone 2 feature. This may be correct, so leave the instance as is. However, if it is an additional receiver of the same brand, make sure you select New Instance in the instance field. By using the next item feature in drivers that contain zones, APEX will increment the zones for you, making auto-programming easier. In most cases, this eliminates the need for selected zone that was commonly used in Integration Designer 9. This is one of a few features that's included in drivers that are optimized for APEX. Thank you for watching.